Bull.
Good afternoon and welcome to Today on BayTV. I'm Liz Cairns and this is Gaynor Morgan.
And today we've been joined by the Bishop of Swansea and Brecon, the Right Reverend John Davis, and of course our very own Keith Milward. But I think first, Liz, we're going to have a look at what happened on this day in history.
Yes, we are. We're going to start with 1923, which was the birth of John Cooper. He developed the British Motor Corporation Mini Cooper, as we all have heard of.
Oh, the Mini!
Yes. Co-founding the company with his dad. We have a little video as well to show.
It was so cool to have a Mini, wasn't it?
My first car was a Mini.
Wow.
Oh, yes.
That market model 1100.
Oh, yes. Oh, well, you were indeed.
You didn't have a Mini then?
No, I did. My wife's had a couple.
All right,
Had a couple, yeah.
So they've come back into vogue now, aren't they?
They have.
But they don't look like Minis anymore, do they? They look like tanks.
Oh, they do. They look quite different. There was something special about the Mini, you know. I remember, unfortunately, my dad wasn't that well at the time, and yet we could get him in the Mini quite easily, you know. So it was his way of seeing the world, I suppose, you know, because before then before he was ill, he was never that fussed about going in the car.
Yeah.
But strangely then, when he had the opportunity to come in the Mini, well, I know all the lanes down the Gower. I know them all, you know, it's beautiful. And I must retrace my steps sometimes because it's so beautiful. But it's nothing like seeing it from a Mini.
Well, there's a very old joke, isn't there? How many elephants can you get into a Mini?
What's the answer?
Two in the back, two in the front.
I like it.
Well, you learned.
I take no credit for
So you enjoyed your Mini days, both of you?
Well, it was my wife's. Can I change the subject slightly to other cars? I'm on a bit of a roll. In Brecon, where I live, and directly opposite the Bishop's house in Brecon, at the weekend, there was a vintage Jaguar rally. I think they were celebrating or marking the 60th anniversary of the Jaguar E-Type.
And did they have some fantastically highly priced cars there?
I don't know what the prices were, but I was just getting
fortune.
back to the house, pulling in, and this magnificent car, it looked like an old Morgan or an MG, but bigger, pulled up. Beautiful cream, absolutely immaculate. It was a Jag, 4.2 litre engine. I got talking to the guy who owned it. 80 years old.
Wow.
I thought, gosh, if I look that sparkly when I'm 80.
Well, you wonder how many cars today will still be around in 80 years' time, don't you?
But back to the Mini. I guess it owners, wasn't it?
Oh, well, you know.
I must admit, I'm into comfort when it comes to cars, and I went from my comfortable car and that with the seats all padded and everything, and my friend, she had a Mini, a very old one, and she was doing it up and that, and she said, oh, let's go for a drive. I must admit, I found it so uncomfortable. I was just like this. I didn't find it comfy. Yeah, yes, I must admit. I think when you go to all this comfort now in the new type of cars and that.
I don't get it at all. I was brought up on a farm a mile off the road. I walked so many miles. If a car goes, that's fine. Don't care what it looks like, don't care if it's rusty.
Me too.
No worries.
Right, moving on. 1964, British speed pioneer Sir Donald Campbell set a new land speed world record of 403.10 mile per hour in his car Bluebird.
He trained down at Pendine, didn't he?
He did, yes.
Yes. Oh, they've got a good museum there now. It's really good, yes.
Yeah. I think we can actually see it in action.
Yeah.
The rule is that 2 runs have to be made, one each way along the measured mile. To get up speed and slow down afterwards entails a run of about 15 miles. The first run was successful. Now Campbell hurtles over the salt flats in the reverse direction. To the joy of everybody, a new record was set at 403.1 miles an hour.
And didn't his grandson bring it back to Pendine to mark the 50th anniversary?
Ah, well, that's what it must be, but it's very well displayed now. Yeah.
First place I ever drove a car.
Yeah.
Pendine Sands.
Oh, really?
You used to be able to take your own cars on there.
All right.
And here I go with cars again. I must have been about, I don't know, 11 or 12.
Whoa.
Wow.
Dad had an old Morris Oxford. And down we went onto the sands, and I...
And how did you go with your first lesson?
Well, it was a bit like that. Peering between
Just pushes.
the steering wheel. But yeah. I don't. Can you still take cars onto Pendine Sands?
No, I just thought the salt would play havoc with the, rusty, but I don't know. We had the same thing at Sker. It was a haunted house, and my little brother used to drive the cars up this mile road, and a rep came in the house one day. He was absolutely ashen, because there's supposed to be a ghost there anyway, and he said, "I've just seen a car driving up the road by itself." It was really funny.
We have a lovely link to Swansea here. 1998, The Mask of Zorro. I'm sure everybody's heard of it.
Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Yes,
Gosh, is that
directed by Martin.
1998?
I know, yeah. And that is still going. I'm continuously seeing it replayed on different channels and that as well.
It's a lovely sort of action film, isn't it?
Yeah.
Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Oh, she's lovely.
Absolutely. She's beautiful in that. I felt that when I saw it, because she wasn't so well known in those days, but I felt that the camera loved her. But I remember seeing it for the first time because I was luckily on tour with Black Mountain Singers, and it happened to be on in a hotel in America, Nashua, yes, New Jersey. So I remember seeing it on that screen. I think, oh, so beautiful, so proud from Swansea.
Yeah, of course, she trained at the Patio Pavilion, didn't she? That's
yes.
Dance. Yes.
Remember her at the age of 11, belting out Big Spender.
And of course, the name Zeta was her grandmother's name, wasn't it? Taken from one of the ships that used to come into Swansea. So there are all the links, and she hasn't lost her accent.
No,
do you remember
the
thing that I think it was made by HTV, Mine All Mine, with Griff Rhys-Jones?
Oh, yeah.
And the daughter in that saying, I'm changing my name. I'm putting Zeta into it.
Oh, right.
Yes, I do.
I forget what the name was.
Yes,
but
I do.
Yeah. Watch it in action?
Oh, yes.
All right, let's.
Leandro! Anga!
Choose your weapon.
Well,
okay, well, we all know what it looks like.
Another Welsh.
Waiting for it.
Yeah, it's another Welsh star anyway, anti-Hopkins.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Gosh, yes, and she's done so many different shows and concerts in the Grand Theatre, and there's some excitement as well because they've just announced the cast of this year's pantomime for Swansea Grand. It's the Aladdin.
Right.
Aladdin's the pantomime, and it's Tony Maudsley, who's from Benidorm. He's from the programme Benidorm, you know, in his bright-coloured outfits. And he's the chap in the hair salon there, you know. So he is going to be leading the cast because Kevin Johns is back, and so is Matt Edwards. And he's, both of them have been in the studio with us, you know, and Doobie Duck as well. So there's puppetry and lots to enjoy.
It's
so
a wonderful, wonderful pantomime.
Shouldn't there?
I can't believe we're talking about pantomime season.
I
Just
know.
don't mention Christmas.
No, it's always this time of the year, and of course we've been waiting with bated breath to see who was going to be in the pantomime, and many look forward to that and start booking. But I'm not going to use the Christmas word at the moment. Great, but there's the Grand Theatre Theatre's got a lovely play this week now. It's the Body Double, it's called. You know, so it's one of the thrillers. You know, so that starts tomorrow night, goes up through till Saturday, and there's almost a lovely atmosphere for a thriller in the Grand.
What's that about then?
Well, apparently it's about a play within a play, and it gets a bit blurred because one of the characters, dies, but you know it's so
Don't
it's
give too much away. No, you don't get anybody in.
We've got to find out two for one offer on opening night, so that's always worth remembering.
Any Christmas offers? No, don't have Christmas.
We'll have a jar soon every time somebody says it's Christmas.
Well, I was wondering if it's hard to draw people in on the lovely evenings, which I hope we're having this week.
They've got a very good air conditioning. It's a special system which goes in, and it's actually a nice retreat if it's very warm to go into the Grand Theatre.
Well, I wonder if we'll need it this week. We're promised, aren't we? Hot weather.
Oh, I hope so.
We have combination weather. I'm sorry. It's going to be nice and warm today, tomorrow. Bit of thundery again then on Wednesday.
No change there then.
Back up
A
again.
normal summer.
Do not quote me on that though. Just in
It
case.
poured with rain on St Swithin's Day, so we'll blame him.
Oh, dear.
40 days of rain, I think.
I know.
But my wife's looking forward to good weather at the weekend because she's cycling from Carnarvon to Chepstow.
Oh, wow.
She's recently done across England.
We'll hear more of that later.
Definitely. Well, thank you both. Next we'll be having a look at the papers with Bishop John Davis and Sam Blaxland.
Look forward to that. See you then. Welcome back to Today on BayTV. I'm Gaynor Morgan. With me is Liz Cairns. Also with us is the Bishop of Swansea and Brecon, the Right Reverend John Davis, and also Sam Blaxland. Thanks for joining us, both of you.
Thank you.
Should we take a look at the papers?
I think we might as well.
The first one I'm going to cover isn't actually in the papers, but it's been everywhere. It's been in the news. And today, the House of Commons are holding a debate on the acid attacks. As we've heard, in London on Thursday, 5 men within a space of 70 minutes were attacked with acid. They're also on about putting in laws in place where any corrosive substances, acid, won't be able to be purchased within shops. So I think you have to be 18. Yes. Yes, I think something like that needs to be done. We were speaking about this, I think it was last week, about whether there was something we could do within Swansea or... It hasn't come that bad over here. There have been incidents in Wales, but not as large as it is in London.
There's been 4 or 5 incidents altogether in the country in the last year.
Yeah.
Which is, it is a lot.
It's horrifying.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's talk about treating it as if it's like carrying a knife, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. It is going to be classed as a lethal weapon.
Yes.
Yes.
But you can carry a knife if you're just buying a knife from a shop for culinary purposes or whatever. And I suppose that would still mean you could possess acid if you were doing it for some kind of test or whatever. But
I rather worry about giving the oxygen of publicity to these issues because you get these copycat incidents then.
Yeah. Well, you've got someone who may have a grudge against somebody else and think, no, that's what I can do.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned that they are thinking of setting an age limit.
Yes.
Below which you can't buy it.
Yes.
I mean, 18?
Yeah, even that.
I mean, people who've been doing this sort of thing are not necessarily teenagers, are they?
We heard back in the beginning of the year, or even back last year, when it was the acid attacks were in the nightclubs. Can you remember that? So it's been going on for obviously quite a while. It's not something new. It's just the amount of people now that are actually doing it. I think they were. One of them was a moped, and they're using the acid to actually take people's stuff off them and that. So it's not just the corrosive stuff that they're using, and obviously it's detrimental to these people's lives for the rest of their lives. Now their lives have changed.
Well, that
instantly.
poor man with the life-changing injuries.
Yeah.
But what concerns me is that, if it's not a gun, it's a knife. If it's not a knife, it's the acid. There is
a ban next.
Not so much the ban, but what is inside us as a society that has to come out in this way all the time, almost.
Well, bad news is news. And one of the things that it's very easy to become is gloomy about the state of society. Yeah. I think you probably expect me to say I don't think we celebrate good news often enough. But there is within the human, mind, personality, a very, very perverse sort of streak when people do the most outrageous and horrid things to each other.
And do you think these kind of acts are indicative of declining moral standards in any kind of way?
I really don't know. I mean, I think it's easy to say, moral decay and so on and so forth. My experience of young people in terms of schools that I visit and other discussions that I have is that the young people with whom I come into contact have got a very, very high sense of justice, moral purpose and so on and so forth. They don't necessarily equate it with religion. But they have a very, very keen sense of what's just and what's unjust. So
Are we talking young people, though?
Well, no, these people seem to be middle-aged, end 20s, I'd say, to be honest.
Are things any worse than they were in terms of... They're almost hate crimes, aren't they? There's people almost...
Lots of things
society.
went on, didn't necessarily...
This isn't new, is it?
No, the oxygen of publicity, as you call it.
But I think it also depends on where you look as well. I mean, in the nicest possible sense, if it's the sort of diocese of Brecon and Swansea, then things will probably be more pleasant than in some of the harsher areas of London. Is where you choose. And you say about going into schools where young people are very positive. This isn't what you're doing, but there is a trick that some politicians play where they just go to nice schools.
Oh, yes. I wonder that.
And talk to nice children.
Yeah. Do you think the internet has an impact?
You can see such awful stuff on the internet, can't you? Yeah. Apparently. Yeah. He says very carefully. And perhaps that does feed into... I mean, there's lots of research done, isn't there, that people who watch things that are violent tend to become more violent. People who have been abused become abusers. So I think it's a trait that's probably always been there.
But also it can engender, I think, envy. I can remember my father back in the 60s when we had colour television sort of saying to us girls, well, life isn't really like that, like you see it on the box. And now it's on your phone, it's everywhere. People are living these fabulous lives, looking wonderful, airbrushed. And it's quite easy, isn't it, to feel...
You can get this sense of envy. I can remember when my wife was expecting our first child, you registered with an antenatal... antenatal, I was getting the right way around. Antenatal clinic. And through the door, quite soon after, comes what was then called the Baby Boots catalogue. Whether anybody's familiar with that. But pictures of the most glorious nurseries with swinging cots, with beautiful crocheted drapes on them. And, you know, the subliminal message that was sending was, if you're not doing that for your child, you're somehow failing them. You're not a proper parent. So it may not be a direct encouragement to people to feel jealous or angry or whatever, but it's quite easily transmitted subliminally.
It's a human emotion, isn't it?
And when
you want to do the best.
When does envy become spite and hatred and worse?
We have got good news. We have. South Wales Evening Post has said that Swansea UK City of Culture 2021, we are shortlisted.
That's really exciting, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. This was over the weekend.
I'm quite sorry for St David's Mind, but there we go.
Well, they do pretty well. They do pretty well. I think they really do.
It's time for us now. We have got a video to show.
Well, we've always been the City of Culture, you know, ever since, you know, Dylan Thomas. Swansea have always spent more ahead for population on culture and sport because it's important to the people that live here. They love culture, they love the sport, getting in participation. We are the Premier League City of Wales. I see us the Premier League City of Culture as well. So yes, it's a great accolade, and it shows what the local authority, working with partners and investing in our culture, can actually deliver for the area. Councillor
Robert Francis Davis, great friend of this programme, of course.
He is, he's been on so many times.
Morriston Ward, I think. Yeah. So,
my question to both of you is, everybody perceives culture differently. What is your perception of culture?
Oh, we both look at each other. I think with these kind of things, you've got to have some kind of parameter to define them, because you can make it a never-ending definition of culture. You can have, you know, for people of my generation, rave culture, you know, and that kind of thing. I think ultimately, I still do define culture as something that's relatively highbrow. So it is kind of it's the typical arts, it's theatre going, it's music, opera. But I think, whilst I say that's relatively high, I think it still has a very, very broad appeal. I think all of that kind of stuff touches most people, affects most people, and has an appeal to most people, and crucially can be quite cheap to engage with. You can go to watch a play for 5, 10 quid, and it can be really it can be really good. But no, for me, culture I define as being relatively in those kind of quite traditional, typical areas, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess most people would say that. Whether it's a proper definition of culture or not, I don't know. I mean, I think I prefer to think of culture as being something which nourishes the entire human being.
That would be the original definition.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of... I mean, I travel down to Swansea very often on a Sunday morning to go to parishes down here, and I will very often drive along the front. So there will be people swimming and jogging, and there will be people bicycling and so on and so forth, relaxing. So if culture can be defined or redefined as something which actually makes you feel better, whether it makes you feel better about yourself, whether it makes you feel better about where you live, the people amongst whom you live. We think of Swansea, you've got the air show, you've got the arts festival, you've got the sea, the bay, you've got all sorts of advantages. Surely that's part of the culture.
And we won't forget the culture in agriculture, will we? Without which none of us could continue. But it's going to be very exciting, game changer, I think.
Yeah,
the culture is about growing, isn't it?
Yes, from the Latin, isn't it, I think? But it's going to be, even just the bid is going to attract really good publicity for us.
And a way for everybody to engage with each other, I think. It's going to be something positive for all of Swansea.
Yes. I mean, the image needs polishing up, doesn't it? And that's no fault of ours. But we were talking earlier about people travelling to Swansea. Well, you go past Cardiff, you go past Newport. Why'd you go that far?
And it all knits together with the city deal, hopefully the lagoon. So good news. So,
Definitely.
Fingers crossed. Thank you, Liz, and thanks both for interesting discussion. So, after the break, we'll be continuing our chat, I think, and talking a bit more about politics and religion and all that makes us human. Sometimes not, perhaps.
See you then.
Welcome back to Today on BayTV. I'm Gaynor Morgan. With me is Liz Cairns, and we're with John Davis, the Bishop of Swansea and Brecon, and of course Sam Blaxland. We're going to be talking politics and religion, with which, Liz, I think we're going to segue nicely into.
Yes, it covers both for definite. Our person that we love here, Donald Trump, he met up with evangelical supporters and they prayed with Trump.
So,
now, how do you both feel about that with regards to them praying? Apparently, they didn't really know, for him, I think. Apparently, they didn't even know that he was going to turn up originally.
All right.
I mean, with America, there's always the very interesting notion of separation of church and state, first and foremost, which funnels into this nicely. On Trump specifically, I'm sceptical of any of his religious credentials. I don't think he's shown any sort of true sense of being a Christian at any point, considering how important that tends to be for American presidents or presidential candidates. To me, I think in many ways I think he still remains quite a secular, liberal New York businessman, to be honest. But I would ask the bishop actually whether you think this kind of stuff is a better thing to see than what essentially is the Western way of looking at religion now, which is essentially apathy amongst large swathes of the population. Surely something like this.
Is President Trump better than apathy?
Don't hold back.
It's better. It's at least this is religious conviction of a type, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I'm rather like you. I really don't know. Well, I think you probably know better than I how to possibly judge Trump, but playing to a particular gallery has, as you say, really quite a lot of importance in American politics. There is the old truism that politics and religion don't mix. I certainly don't subscribe to that, because I think the manifesto of the New Testament is pretty cogent in terms of its parallels with justice, freedom issues and so on and so forth. And I think the church itself has a right to speak out on that, and indeed to call politicians to account on behalf of the people who haven't got any...
have bishops in the House of Lords for that very purpose.
People who haven't got any voice or capacity to say, or opportunity to say these things. But I think I'm with you on President Trump, quite frankly. I mean, these people apparently were just visiting the White House, and the president happened to be in, so here we go. I wouldn't say that you shouldn't say prayers for somebody, having said that, but I would suggest...
In particular, President Trump, perhaps?
Well, maybe, but maybe there's a bit more self-publicity in this than anything else.
Do you balk, Bishop, at the use of God and religion to fight people's battles? I mean, in God's name. I mean, it's been very dangerous in the past, hasn't it?
Religion over the centuries, and it's no different now, has been used for all sorts, to justify all sorts of terrible things.
But people then use it to dish religion, and then by association,
you're absolutely
God.
right. You're absolutely right. They shoot the messenger.
Yes.
I think you're absolutely correct to say that it's a target. It's an easy target.
Isn't it remarkable, though, how people still cite things like the Crusades, thousand-year-old ventures, to sort of say, how look what wicked things the church and religion has done. Whereas, I mean, there's contextualising things, and then there's just taking things...
They don't talk about education, healthcare, and so on and so forth, which the church was pioneering. And there was some interesting research done a while ago on that very point about the Crusades. I can't remember when it was done or who did it, but they set it into its true context. Yes, it was barbaric. Yes, it was pretty awful. But... they said this is not the end of the story where people say, religion has caused untold harm to the world. Misunderstood, misused, it's like any other thing. It can be a weapon.
When it comes to the Christian religion in this country, has it not lost its way a little bit, or sense of purpose? We're celebrating 300 years of William Williams' Pantycelyn in Llandovery. There have been lots of celebrations over the weekend, and so talk of the Great Revival and all this sort of thing. We haven't got that now. Beg your pardon, but we haven't got any very charismatic religious leaders, really.
Well, thanks, I'm off. Bye-bye, everybody.
Oh, have we? Correct me.
The great figures. I mean, I suppose that are not perhaps the great orators. Perhaps there are still around some great thinkers. I mean, in terms of a former Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yes.
Swansea Valley by Rowan Williams, one of the great thinkers of our time.
He's retired.
Lord Oystermouth.
Lord
Yes,
Oystermouth.
he's retired back here, hasn't he?
But yeah, I mean, the fiery preachers may not be around. And I guess in terms of Wales, some of that has vanished, of course, with the decline in the chapels, which had a greater tradition for that kind of fiery preaching style, you know. So,
but is the church influential in younger people's lives?
No, in one word, absolutely not. And the only people who are really interested in religion, who are my kind of age or young, are atheists. Is my experience. It's people, at least atheists, take a real interest in it. They're reading books. They often read the Bible so that they can argue against it. It goes back to my apathy point. I would imagine a much worse force than atheism for the church and for Christianity is this apathy.
Agnosticism.
Well, not even agnosticism. I think agnosticism is something you can logically come to. I've come to agnosticism logically, but some people don't even give it any kind of thought.
No.
I would say, and that in many ways is more dangerous and corrosive.
I think part of the problem there is, particularly with rampant atheism, I think there's a caricature of an atheist, there's a caricature of someone who's a Christian, because the anti-Christian message that is very often portrayed is spoken against those who are fundamentalist, conservative, of a particular breed, for whom, and I mean, I've come across them myself, you look at the scriptures and you say, there they are, you swallow that hook, line and sinker as a book of history, a book of all sorts of things, science, this is this, it rules that out, which is a really ridiculously inept understanding of what scripture is. It's created, it's crafted, it's edited, it's carefully put together, not to be a textbook, but to be a lifestyle guide, actually.
Yeah. What would you say with regards to the younger generation? They have their faith, definitely. They still have their faith, but they don't tend to attend the churches. I can
tell you a story about a young man who used to sit on the steps of one of my parish churches when I was a parish priest in Newport. Sadly died at the age of, I think he's in his mid-20s. Drug addict. Yeah. Everybody had tried in different ways to help him, including his family, who were a perfectly respectable family. Yeah. He'd sit on the steps of the church and I'd talk to him. And occasionally he'd say to me, I find this Jesus to be a fascinating character. And his teachings, you know, if more people actually subscribed to those teachings and followed them rather than just paying them lip service, it would be great. And I can remember him one day jerking his thumb back towards the church and saying, but I don't think I'd find him in there.
That's interesting.
And yet,
so the institutional church doesn't necessarily represent what it should.
And a church has two meanings, doesn't it? It is the physical institution, but it's also the body of people as well, and that can mean two different things.
Well, you've put your finger on it again. It's not the club.
Which, of course, is what Canon Ian Rees and his wife Helen are doing here in Swansea. They're taking the mission out. But if we can just come back to the church itself, things are changing. Of course, women bishops, the second woman bishop in Wales, the Bishop of Llandaff.
I made one on Saturday.
I think you were there. I think we've got a picture. You were in the Western Mail with her. There we are. I said, where are you in that picture, Bishop?
It's a bit like Where's Wally? I'm absolutely bang in the middle because the service took place in my cathedral because I'm the senior bishop at the moment. And so I led that service. And I think I'm the one with the tallest hat.
Yes, I think you are.
Right in the middle. Wonderful occasion.
It's been a long time coming, though, hasn't it?
Yeah.
For it to be normal to have a woman bishop.
But in the church in Wales, within the last 12 months, 2 women bishops.
To get back to the tall hats, you're talking about doing away with the mitres?
No,
that's just gossip in the newspapers, is it? Well, why do we need them? Don't they distance you from us? Or is that...
Well, what you'd be quite surprised at is if you turn up for a service and you haven't got the mitre, where's the mitre? Where's the hat? Why haven't you brought your hat?
So people...
I'm sorry to say, it can even come down to the photographs. You want a photograph of the bishop with his hat on.
His hat. I like a bit of pomp and ceremony. What do you think, Sam? You know, when you see in the House of Commons and the House of, all this stuff that we're famous for.
You see bishops in the House of Lords, don't you?
Yes.
I don't know. I've had a change of heart on this quite recently. I used to shun all of this and all the ceremony, but actually, in recent times and recent years, I've realised that as a country we are culturally Christian. That's the fundamental point that I think. And even though I think the latest census has showed that more people identify as not being a Christian than do,
not being church
going. No, sure, absolutely. I mean, certainly very few people. Absolutely. Although I think less and less people will identify as being Christian. And I wonder whether there's a need to reassert elements of that, to be a little bit more muscular about it in some ways.
Well, actually presenting what the church stands for and what the gospel really means.
Yes.
Sermon on the Mount is a manifesto for decent living and decent relationships.
And the story's going to run and run. But we'll come back to it again after the break. So we'll be staying with Sam Blaxland and the Bishop of Swansea and Brecon. And we'll see you after the break.
See you then. and welcome back to your final part of Today on BayTV. I'm Liz Cairns and this is Gaynor Morgan, and we're still with Sam Blaxland and the Bishop of Swansea and Brecon, John Davis.
And more politics and religion. Are they a good mix?
Properly understood. Properly understood. If I can dare quote scripture, one of the things that Jesus said was, I've come that they might have life in all its fullness. I can't think of a better political manifesto than that, quite frankly.
And of course, I think to an extent both depend on good leadership, a very high quality of leadership. Have we got that either in religion? I know I maligned you earlier, or politics.
We're doing it again.
Have we got good leadership? Perhaps we'll start in politics with all the debate over and furore over Theresa May and the plotting and.
Well, I mean, firstly, I would say that I think both done well, politics and religion both have a very strong element of public service to them. The public service ethos should be, although it isn't always, but I'm talking more from the politics.
That's not how it's perceived.
No, indeed, and this is what I was about to say, is that I think the current leadership we have, in many ways across the board in British politics, isn't particularly strong. I mean, Theresa May, for all her faults, is necessarily now just a prime minister in limbo, essentially, and can't be an effective leader because her cabinet are saying all kinds of things in private and in public about the way the government should be operating, the way the Brexit negotiations should be run, and thinking, I would imagine, about who is going to be the next leader and the next prime minister. So. No, I think it's all very unstable. Unfortunately, at a time when it really shouldn't be.
I wonder. I question that. Is not the instability perhaps reflecting the state of the nation, really? Because we're in a state of flux about Brexit, and people have very strong opinions either way.
Bit late now.
Well, a bit late. And are we in a state of flux? I'm not entirely sure about this. It depends what opinion polls you look at, but there still seems to be people are pretty resolute about leaving the European Union. And what I've noticed very significantly recently with the negotiations that have been happening, when Michel Barnier has been saying this is not possible and this is not possible. What I've noticed is that people are saying, well, this is why we voted to leave in the first place. The complex bureaucratic nature of the European Union, which is being displayed here, was why people chose to leave initially, and it's just reinforcing
Would you say
their problems with it.
As our own Carwyn Jones now, he's been standing up for us and saying with regards to Wales, do you think there should be a fear around that and that we may lose out?
The other thing I would say about that is he says he's standing up for Wales, and I see what he's doing, but he's been going directly to the European Commission and talking with them.
Yes.
Ultimately, if he really, really wanted to stand up for Wales, the person he should be bargaining with is David Davis, the Brexit Secretary. I know they're on other sides of the divide politically, but David Davis is doing our negotiations. People like Michel Barnier are doing the negotiations for the other side.
It has to be done.
It has to be done through Westminster, and it has to be done with the Westminster politicians, Tory or not.
Tony Blair was back in the media spotlight at the weekend, saying, well, again, hinting that, well, this may not have to happen, this may not have to happen. And it's almost trying to send a signal that indirectly you can have a second referendum without actually having a second referendum. And quite frankly, I just want people to get on with the conversation, cross-party conversations, and all the intrigue, if you can call it that, within the Conservative Party. I mean, I heard Matthew Parris on Radio 4 a couple of weeks ago, forecasting, like so many others are forecasting, the downfall of the Prime Minister. I couldn't give a monkey's, quite frankly. I just want them to get on with doing what's best for Britain and not squabbling.
And to remember to look after those who are just managing.
Yes.
We didn't hear about that.
What she promised.
The jams, yes. But it's so interesting when you talk about cross-party consensus. And this is something that Daniel Hannan said in the Telegraph, the Sunday Telegraph the other day. He was saying that when it comes to negotiations and both sides are throwing quite hard Brexit-style things out there, isn't it surprising that your likes of Nick Clegg and your likes of Chuka Umunna seem to side with the European side of it rather? They say, oh yes, we wouldn't be allowed this, we wouldn't be allowed that kind of thing. I think cross-party, there needs to be at least some positive rhetoric and some positive language about leaving the European Union, because most people accept it's going to happen.
Yes.
And creating some sort of sense of positivity about something before negotiations matters. Having a sense, having just an atmosphere matters.
Remember Dad's Army?
What,
Private Fraser? We're
all doomed, yes.
We're all doomed. Well, I mean, I'm getting a bit weary of we're all doomed.
Yeah, and a lot of people are saying that when really we don't know what the process is going to be like. Of course, it's going to be complicated, but saying we're doomed from the outset is going to set a precedent. It's going to set a tone, isn't it?
Well, we know it. we are told it's going to be complicated. I have yet to be convinced. It seems to be very complicated.
It's going to be expensive,
but a separation,
isn't it?
Again,
well, who knows? Because the whole thing's never happened before. So people making these absolutely certain predictions it's going to be either good or bad. We don't know, and we're going to find out. But only when we find out will we know. And that's why that's the fundamental point that I'm trying to make about why I'm so surprised people aren't erring on the side of positivity rather than deliberately being negative.
But it brings us back to the quality of our leadership, because these people have to talk to the rest of the European Union, the 27 countries and the rest of it. Have we got the calibre of people we want as politicians? I wouldn't want a child of mine to be a politician.
Personally, I don't think so, although I would say that of all people, David Davis has had a long career of being involved in European Union issues. He's been on scrutiny committees for a very long time. He was actually a whip when they passed through the Maastricht Treaty in 1992, which was the big, the last final, the sort of nail in the coffin of Britain being in the European Union as people perceived it. David Davis knows how it all works, and I'm willing to give him, for the time being, the benefit of the doubt, even though he seems to have certain negative qualities.
Yeah,
I think if of all the government ministers who were realistically going to take that post, he might be okay, but time will tell.
I mean, you know vastly more about it than I do, but I think what you've just said is abundant common sense. You put somebody in charge who's got a track record. If all you can actually see in terms of the leadership is, was it Boris Johnson saying, you know, we're just whistling, and Mr. Juncker on the other side saying, I hear no one whistling, I hear the clock ticking.
Oh yes, no, that
trading.
That was Michel Barnier, and he said it was so marvellously stereotypically French when he said it. He said, all I can hear is a clock ticking. Yes, it was brilliant.
I think a lot of people are concerned, though, with regards, we have had a lot of EU funding, whether from universities and farming, exactly,
roads,
subsidies of the farming.
Infrastructure.
Yes.
It's a bit like the Monty Python and the Life of Brian, isn't it? What have we got to thank the Romans for? What have we got to thank the EU for? There's a lot.
Oh, yes,
it's a great
it is.
deal.
It is.
But I think a lot of voters in Wales did realise this. You know, structural funding, Part 1 funding that is poured into Wales more than in any other part. I did speak to people. I actually went to some of the sort of the Brexit hotspots in Wales and asked, you know, you knew this money was coming in. Why did you still vote to leave? And they said there was a fundamental democratic issue here because nobody ever consulted about where this money went. Nobody ever asked. They said all these funds are just slushing around here and they've been spent on this and this and this. Now, of course, there is the argument saying, well, it's better to spend money on something than nothing. But if you'd have asked people what their priorities were in, say, the South Wales valleys, coal and coal mining might have come into it, but that's completely off the agenda from the European Union.
Jobs.
Yes, exactly. Not some.
But since we are looking forward, we cannot look back. We have to look forward. Where is this money going to come from now to sustain Wales?
Well,
the only thing I know of
they have promised. Well, the British government have promised that they've said that they will reimburse all of it. Of course, by doing that.
What about farming?
So there is a magic money tree.
Well, there is a magic money tree, and also
well, yes.
that is a considerable chunk of that 350 million for the NHS kind of money. The problem with taking all this money back is politicians can spend it over and over again. They can spend it many, many times on many different priorities. I think there is a case here to be worried about with Wales, but I think it's also got to be, you're right, I think, Amy, we're talking about farming, that's a very, very considerable
over 80% of the land mass is rural.
I know, absolutely. But
absolutely.
Yeah, so language is underpinned by our rural communities, and in 40 years as an agricultural journalist, I have never detected a strong will within the UK government to support Welsh farming. Whether they should or shouldn't.
I mean, you take the broader picture. One of the things that I've said frequently myself is that we don't understand the rural nature of vast swathes of the country, but Wales in particular.
Yes.
I mean, we focus Cardiff, Swansea, Wrexham, conurbations. The vast majority of my diocese is not just rural, deep rural.
And marginal.
Very often.
And services, don't get me onto broadband. In the rural areas.
Very often they're holding the community together, giving the old lady a lift to the GP.
Which is where during the whole Brexit process it'd be really interesting for the role the Welsh government plays one.
Yes, very interesting stuff. The story's going to run
we'll be continuing covering it again, won't we?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And a big thank you to all our guests today for joining us on the show.
And don't forget that following the show, we've got our afternoon matinee film. Today, it's the 1945 film Dick Tracy, starring Morgan Conway. Stay tuned, BayTV.
And enjoy the film.